Hey guys, welcome back to the Out Jeeping YouTube channel. My name is Austin, and today we're back to working on my 78 Jeep J10 truck. And along the lines of going through all the systems and getting this thing so it's mechanically sound, today we're going to be tackling the transmission and doing a little bit of maintenance on that. Now what we're going to be doing is dropping the pan on the transmission, taking out all the fluid that's in it, and putting in a new filter, new gasket, and everything like that. And along with that, I'm going to add a transmission cooler, since this one did not come with a factory transmission cooler. It just has the built-in heat exchanger that's in the radiator, so we're going to be adding that as well. So a little background on the transmission that's in this. This is actually a Turbo 400 transmission, also known as TH400. It's found in a lot of these 60s and 70s Jeep full-size Jeeps, as well as a lot of GM vehicles as well, since this is a GM transmission that's in this Jeep, and it is a 3-speed automatic. So without further ado, let's take a look at all the components that we're going to be replacing to be able to do this job, and then we'll dive into this Jeep and start taking it apart. Alright, so to do this job, it's not too many components that we have. Right here we have a Wix transmission filter right here. This is part number 58881. And I'll leave a link down in the description for all these parts if you guys want to use the same parts that I am. So you guys can easily find that as well. Now moving over to the transmission coolers, I got this Hayden transmission cooler. This is the model 402. It's a little bit bigger than the one I recently put on my Jeep Cherokee, but as you guys know, I like the brand Hayden right here. I've had good luck with them. They're fairly inexpensive to get them off of Amazon. I think this is only around 30 bucks or so, and then it comes with a bunch of hardware and everything like that to install this as well. And like you guys have seen in the past, we're going to be making some custom brackets to fit this on there as well. It should be pretty straightforward. There is a lot of room in front of the radiator to install this as well. Along with that, I got some hose right here. This is actually power steering hose, this 3/8 line right here. I prefer using this because it just seems a lot more durable, and it's not easy to cut or kink on this at all. And it's actually half the price of normal transmission line. So I opted to use this line. I just get it by the foot at my local O'Reilly's. I think it's around $2.50 a foot, so it's fairly inexpensive and half the price of the transmission line. And it's running hydraulic fluid through it, so it's pretty much rated for what transmission lines can be rated for. I think this is up to 300 psi, but these lines aren't going to be anywhere near that, so we shouldn't have to worry about pressure issues at all. Then along with that, we have our transmission fluid right here. I'm using this Castrol Dex Merc. It's rated for Dextron 3 in older vehicles. Same stuff I use in my Jeep Cherokee XJ with the AW4 transmission. This Turbo 400 calls out for Dex Merc, so that's what we're going to be using here today. So I got about 1.5 gallons. Hopefully that should be enough for this job. Now there is also some transmission hard lines that are in there. I'm not sure the condition on those. They're probably going to be rusty or whatever, so I might go ahead and replace those, but it's not necessary if yours are still in good shape. But we'll take a look once we're underneath there, so I can bend up some hard line and we can replace those as well. Other than that, that's not too much. You might want to get some hose clamps and maybe some RTV if you want to use that with your gasket. This filter right here does come with a rubber gasket, and I've always opted just to use the rubber gasket with no RTV on transmission pans, and I've never had any issues. But you want to take a look at your application. If there's rough surfaces or uneven surfaces, you might want to use some RTV and use that as well. So let's head over to the Jeep. We'll crawl underneath it and take a look at the transmission pan. I don't think that there is a transmission plug on there, so we're going to have to drop the pan and all the fluid's going to come out there. So it might get a little bit messy, but we'll go ahead and take a look underneath the Jeep. Alright, so we're underneath the Jeep J10, and since I do have a 3-inch lift with some larger tires, I got plenty of room to work underneath here, and I don't need to lift up the Jeep at all, so this is going to be nice and easy to be able to get at this pan. And just looking all around here, it looks like we do have some 1/2-inch bolts going all the way around the perimeter, and as you can tell, we do have some fluid leak right here, and it is red, so that's going to be transmission fluid that's leaking out of here. And just taking a closer look at it, it looks like someone has been in here. Good indication is that looking at these bolts, they kind of look like they're a little bit rounded on the corners. They don't look like bolts that haven't been touched before, so I know someone's probably been in here before, and obviously this is leaking from the pan gasket I can see, so someone didn't seal it up as good either. Another thing you can tell, if you have a GM transmission, obviously it's going to be stamped on here, so this one has Hydromatic Division of GMC So we don't have a drain plug that's on this pan right here, so what we're going to have to do is just work this all around with all the bolts, and we're going to drop one side, have a pan, it's going to kind of spill out the other, get a little bit of fluid out first before we take out the rest of the bolts, and then we should be able to lower this down and then fully drain it into the drain pan. Now looking on the passenger side of the transmission, we have our transmission lines that actually go in. So we got our feed and we got our return that go right there, and they actually look to be in decent shape. I don't see any leaks coming from it, and they don't really seem that rusty. They're just dirty and full of grease and grime and everything like that, and pretty much go all the way to the front of the engine before they go into a soft line that goes into the radiator. So I think I can get away with reusing these. They should be fine. I might just end up putting some new clamps on it where it's supposed to bolt onto the oil pan bolts, just to kind of keep them secure. So I might add those later on as well. So I'm going to get ready to break these free. I'm going to get some oil pans. I got cardboard all down here, so I shouldn't have to worry about getting my concrete dirty. But if you have some pig mats or something to absorb, but we're probably going to make a mess when we drop this down, so we want to be prepared for that and catch as much fluid as we can. All right, so I'm going to crack all these free. The only ones I'm going to take out all the way are just the front ones for now, and then we'll slowly start working back and then kind of peel it, so that way our fluid is going to flow out the front here, because if we try doing the rear, it's going to get on the cross member for the transmission, and then it's just going to leak everywhere. Alright, so we got a good stream already coming, so our sealing surface is broken, but I'm going to be trying to pry it down, so hopefully it just comes out the front. I'm going to let that sit for a second until it kind of slows down before we pull it anymore. Be nice to have like a cookie pan or something like that. That's something nice and big, so it can get the full surface area, so that way you don't have to try to juggle two catch pans under here. So I think I'm going to end up tilting it towards the passenger side, because that's where it looks like most of the fluid just wants to come out. So that's what I'm going to do here. Take out this last bowl on this side and slowly drop it down. Alright, pan is off. We're going to let that drip for a little bit so it slows down, so we're not just covering ourselves in transmission fluid. Alright, so the transmission's finishing off on dripping all that, or at least slowing down so we don't get too wet at all. But we got the transmission pan up here on the workbench. We can take a closer look at it. And the reason why I think that it was leaking from the gasket is because, one, the gasket, if this was rubber, it doesn't really feel like rubber anymore. It kind of feels really spongy, so it's probably just disintegrating. And it also looks like someone used some RTV with it. And oftentimes and not, every time I see people that use like red RTV with a rubber gasket, I've always see it fail like this, where it just pretty much disintegrates, and it always ends up with a really bad leak. So that's why I don't like using RTV too much. If it's got good sealing surfaces, it really is not needed. From the factory, they only put in a rubber gasket because that's what it was designed for. So that's what we were going to be doing here again today. But taking a look at the bottom of the pan, there isn't any magnet that's down here, so I can't see where all the shavings kind of collected to. But if you just wipe your finger on here, there is a little bit of clutch material, but it's nothing too bad. The fluid on this was just a dark red. It wasn't black. It doesn't smell burnt, so I'm not too concerned about the transmission being burnt out or anything like that. So I think we're going to be fine. We're just going to have to clean this up really good, because we got about 1/16 of an inch of just like clutch material and stuff on the bottom here. So we're going to clean that up and get this thing all looking brand new again. So I'm going to pull off the gasket first, just with the putty knife here. It's probably going to come off in chunks. It kind of does look like it was some sort of paper gasket, because just the way it's tearing, it doesn't look too much like it was rubber. We got a new rubber one that's going to go in it, so that's going to be just fine. And another indication that this RTV failed is, like, I'm pulling this up right here, and I haven't even pulled any of this before, and you can see that it's all wet underneath here. So fluid was already making its way underneath where that RTV has failed and not bonded to any of the surfaces anymore. I'm just going to take a paper towel and get some of this thicker stuff out of here. I'm just going to get this as clean as I can first, and then take some degreaser and a brush and take it outside with a hose and just get it really clean. But yeah, that's all pretty much clutch material, that dark gray stuff. Next, I'm going to take a wire wheel and a drill and just clean up the gasket surface right here, get any of that stuck on stuff off, and it should be fine with just a wire wheel on this. It's not a head gasket, so we don't have to worry about small imperfections. Alright, so for cleaning up the transmission side, I'm pretty much going to do the same thing with a wire wheel and just kind of go around. It does look a lot cleaner on the transmission side, so we won't really have too much material to take off. I'm going to do that with the old filter still in here, and the reason for is because I don't want to have the new filter on, because I don't want to get a bunch of dirt that possibly flings up and sticks on there as well. But one thing I've noticed is that this guy is loose in here, and that does not look too good. That should not be like that at all. That should be nice and tight, and it looks like that guy is either the wrong bolt or it's not tight enough or something like that. But good thing we're in here because we're going to fix all of that. I'm just going to quickly take a rag and just kind of go around the surface so I'm not flinging fluid everywhere. Then I'll take a wire wheel and make sure that it's flicking stuff away from the inside of the transmission. Alright, so I got any remaining chunks off with the wire wheel. I'm going to pull this filter now. It's held in by 1/2 inch bolt, and there's going to be some more fluid in it, so make sure you still have your catch pan underneath this. And that looks like that bolt is bottoms out in there, so that was all the way tight, but for some reason that's pretty loose, so let's take this all the way off. And now for the top side, there is a plastic pickup up there, so that's going to flow out and have a catch pan underneath that because that'll make a big mess. Alright, so I did some quick research to see if I'm the only one with that issue, and apparently all these transmissions come like that, with basically that filter that's loose in there. And the only real explanation I can figure out from doing some research is that the reason why it has some looseness to it is that way it can droop down and sit on the bottom of the pan, so that way it's not starving of any oil at any time. So, and because there could be a couple different pan designs across these transmissions in different vehicles and stuff like that, if you have a deep pan, it's going to sit a little bit lower, so that way it can sit on the bottom of a deep pan, and it can raise up if it's with a shallow pan. So that's kind of why it's loose like that. It's just by design. If you do get a new pan kit, sometimes they do come with a spacer that works specifically with that pan, so that way it sits exactly where it needs to be. But since I'm using the original pan, this is the original design, nothing specific on this, I'm just going to go ahead and run it with it being loose like that. Even though I don't like it, but I'm just going to have to deal with it because I don't want to have to deal with shimming right now, because I don't know exactly where that's going to sit with this pan right here. I don't want to put any washers or spacers in place when I don't know for sure if it's sitting on the bottom of the pan, and I could accidentally burn up the transmission if it's set up too high and it's starving of transmission fluid. So we're going to run it the way it was when we took it out. But when we did take the old one out, you wanted to make sure that you took the gasket with it that was going to this pickup right here. That came out with the filter, so we don't have to worry about that. Just going to wipe that clean a little bit, some residual stuff on there. And I'm also going to take a rag with some brake clean and get the sealing surface all around here nice and clean before I put on that filter, since it does kind of get in the way of some things. So I'm going to do that right now, and then we'll pop on our new filter. Alright, so we got our new Wix filter. I'm going to pop this up, make sure I pop it into the pickup tube. There it goes. And then we got our bolt right here. Pop that in. Then we'll snug this guy up. It's nothing too crazy. I think it's only around 10 foot-pounds or so. Just like that. All right, now we're ready to put on the pan. We're going to go over to the pan first, make sure that's 100% clean, get our gasket on there, and we'll bring this over and install it onto the vehicle. All right, so got our pan all cleaned up. I just went and took some super clean and a brush and a hose and just kind of cleaned it all up inside and out. So this thing is ready to go back in. I'm just going to hit our sealing surface one last time with some brake clean, make sure that's all cleaned off. A couple things that I noticed is, you might be able to tell in this top right corner, they actually have the indent, all these little marks right here where that transmission filter was just kind of sitting down in there. So that's where I guess it needs to be, is just sitting on the bottom of the pan, so that way it's sucking up all that oil and you won't get any air ingress into the system. Then we got our new rubber gasket. We're going to fit this on top of here. And then I went and kind of cleaned off our bolts so we can stick these through and they'll kind of hold that gasket into place. Alright, that gasket's all ready to go. Now we can go to the Jeep and pop this into place. So I'll start these by hand and then we'll start tightening them up with the ratchet. So these are all pretty much finger tight now. Now I'm just going to kind of go around, snug them up, kind of in a crisscross pattern. These don't have to be too tight. I think they're only like 5 foot-pounds or something like that. But we'll evenly tighten this all the way around by hand, and then this should be all sealed up. Alright, so with that all snugged up, we're pretty much finished with this pan side. And one last thing I'm going to do is, with a paint marker, just write the date with the filter and fluid change on here, so that way, in case this goes to someone else, or if it's myself, I know exactly when this transmission has been gone into. Alright, so we're all finished with the transmission side. We're going to switch gears and go up towards the front of the Jeep, and that's where we're going to install our transmission cooler. We're going to do all that stuff before we fill this with fluid, because we're going to do that very last at the end, so that way we have the correct amount in the transmission. So let's switch gears and head over to the front of the Jeep and see where we're going to mount our transmission cooler. Alright, switching gears a little bit, we are working over here on the front of the Jeep now, where we're going to mount our transmission cooler. If you guys recall from the last J10 video, we installed our power steering cooler over here on the driver's side. This time we're going to put it on the opposite side over here on the passenger side. We're going to tuck it down in the bottom over there. So to be able to get in there to mount it and build my bracket and everything like that, I'm going to have to remove this grill. So same thing like last time, just have to remove the bezels. There's some Phillips screws on the bottom and some 1/2-inch hardware on top. So we're going to zip those out quick and get this grill removed. Alright, so with that grill removed, we can get in here and start mocking this up. So this is our transmission cooler right here. It's a little bit wider than the one I used on the Cherokee, so it should offer some good cooling properties. But as far as mounting this, I'm thinking of just tucking it right in here. That way I can have my transmission lines exit down over here to the passenger side and loop underneath behind the radiator to the hard lines over there. I'm still going to have it plumbed into the radiator for the heat exchanger, so I'm going to have it go through that first and then through the cooler right here before it goes back into the transmission. So that's how I'm going to route all of the cooling lines and such. But as far as mounting this, I'm just going to make some quick brackets out of some 1/8-inch metal, and nothing more than just an L bracket bent where I need it. And then I'll drill some holes in it and have some isolated clamps on there to hold this into place. So that way there's no vibrations that are going to be chafing any holes in this at all. Now with these transmission kits, they do come with the zip tie method, where you can just simply put it anywhere you want and then zip tie it through the radiator, and it kind of holds it into place wherever you mount it. If you guys recall, I don't like doing that option because over time that could loosen up and possibly wear a hole in your radiator or your transmission cooler. Then those things are ruined and then you'll have a big leak on your hands. So this just kind of keeps everything isolated and not rubbing up against other components and things like that. So I'm going to go and cut up some brackets and kind of measure where things need to go, and then we'll get this guy mounted into place, and then we'll start plumbing up our lines. Alright, so off camera I went ahead and just made some quick L brackets right here that we're going to use to secure this transmission cooler. It's nothing more than just some 1/8 inch steel that I cut out of some plate, put a 90-degree in there, bent it in the vise, and just painted it real quick. And then to get the height out of these, I just kind of mocked it up so that way it's at the same height as my power steering cooler, so that way it matches up right next to it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to bolt this transmission cooler to these brackets, and then we'll take everything over to the Jeep and start bolting it onto there. So I got some cushion clamps right here. These are just 5/8 cushion clamps, so that way it doesn't have any vibrations transferring into this cooler, so nothing accidentally gets worn through and have any leaks possibly. So this should be ready to go. So I just got some 1/4 inch hardware, and that's what we're going to use to bolt this all together. Alright, so I got our brackets on there, and what I'm going to do beforehand, before I mount this onto the Jeep, is to mount our transmission line onto here, since this part is going to be hard to get to behind the front fascia piece. So I'm going to attach this onto here, both of our lines. I just got one section here, and once I route it to where I need to, I'll cut it into the exact spot it needs to be, but there should be plenty of line for what we're doing here. So I'm just going to slip these on and clamp them into place. Alright, so it's going to be a little bit tight in here, but we're going to make it work. Also tight where I'm working, since I'm right up against the wall here, since I got the Jeep pulled in all the way, but my garage isn't very deep, so we'll just have to deal with it. So I went ahead already and drilled some holes in this front core support down here. It's a nice flat surface right in front of the radiator, and that's where we're going to be bolting this up to. So it's going to sit somewhere in right there. We have to find a good position for these lines to kind of relax so they're not getting too stressed out. So I like about using power steering line for this, or at least this kind I got from O'Reilly's, is you can put it into some really tight corners, some tight bends and stuff like that, and it won't kink on you, which is nice. So I'm going to start feeding in some hardware to kind of hold it into place. There we go. I'll get some nuts on the back side and we'll tighten that up. Alright, so we're underneath the Jeep here, and we need to route our transmission lines so they go into our radiator for the heat exchanger and then into our new transmission cooler. Now we're actually back here at the transmission again, and I'll explain in a little bit what we're going to be doing just because of the way that these lines are routed that go to and from the transmission here all the way up to the front. Basically, I'm trying to flip around the feed and return lines that are on the transmission here, and the reason being is because the placement where I routed the transmission cooler, it's going to make tapping in the lines kind of a little bit weird. They're going to have to like cross over onto the driver's side since it's on the passenger side, and I don't want a bunch of lines kind of all spaghettied up front, and it actually make it look a lot more cleaner if I just flip these hard lines around right here. So as you can tell, we got two lines going into the transmission here. The upper one is the return line going back into the transmission, and to be able to route it how I want to, I basically just need to flip these lines right here. Now they just got a simple fitting on here that's going to spin off, and it's similar to like a brake line. I got the top one off here. As you can see, that's all nice and loose. The problem is the bottom one here is nice and tight, and I've actually had this soaking for a couple of weeks, and I just can't get it to break free. even tried some heat, penetrating fluid, everything I could, and I'm just gonna have to bite the bullet and just have it break off and then make a new line, which shouldn't be too bad because it's pretty much just like a brake line. It looks like either a 1/4 inch or a 3/8 line right here, so nothing too bad. We'll make a new line. The rest of the line actually doesn't look too bad either. It's not really rusty at all. So I'm going to finish and just kind of spin this off. It's probably going to break as I get this mostly off of here, but we'll get these flipped around and I'll make a new line up here and then we'll connect it to our transmission cooler. And it looks like a little adapter kind of came off with this, so we'll have to separate that and put this part back into the transmission. So I'm going to work on pulling the rest of this line. We'll get it up on the workbench and just kind of mock a new one up right next to it. This should be easy since this is not really hooked into place like it should be. So I just got to disconnect it up by the radiator. Alright, it's a couple days forward and had to wait a little bit because I went ahead and ordered some new copper nickel line that is going to replace the existing transmission lines. Now these transmission lines, I pulled both of them out of here right away since I decided I'm just going to replace both of them. Since we did have that snap off that was on there, and I realized the issue is it actually didn't break free where the flare is on the line. Instead, it was actually pulling out this adapter that was plugged into the transmission and just broke free from there. So this was still tight on there, and that's why it broke on there. So wasn't because of the rust on there. As you can see, it's moving nice and freely now. It just, I didn't see it from the angle, and that adapter was coming off instead. So I went ahead and separated them. We'll just have to plug this guy back into the transmission before we install our new lines. But overall, on these lines, they're really not too bad. They're not rusted or anything. They're just pretty gross with a bunch of grease and oil and everything on there. And it won't be too much more just to make some new lines. So I went ahead and picked up some 3/8 copper nickel line right here. This is basically the same thing as brake line, but in the 3/8 size. And there's a lot of controversy on what brands to use for this. And I'll tell you guys, the best brand I've ever used is this brand right here called 4 Lifetime Lines. They do sell on Amazon, but I found it actually a lot cheaper just going to their website, and even paying with a $6 shipping, it comes out significantly cheaper. I think for this roll right here, if I were to buy it on Amazon, it was like 65 bucks, but off their website, it was like only $42 after shipping, so it really wasn't too bad. But the reason why there's some controversy on what brands you get is because these are not all made the same. This is actually a true copper nickel line. It's nice, soft, malleable, and it's nice corrosion resistance. And I'll show you a couple examples over here of me making some mistakes over time by purchasing some other cheaper stuff. So right here is some 3/16 line. It's nice and malleable stuff, so I know it's like copper at least, but as you can see, this wasn't even on a vehicle at all, but this is just a practice piece. There's already some corrosion just from the atmosphere, moisture, and everything like that from sitting a couple of years. It's green like that, so this is pretty much just straight up copper right here. This is not the stuff you necessarily want to run on your vehicle because it's just going to corrode same way as natural copper does. That's why you want the copper nickel line. And even over here, you want to be careful. This is just copper coated steel. It might look like it's the right stuff, but you can take a magnet to this and it sticks onto there. So this stuff is actually still steel, but it's just copper coated, and who knows how long that copper coating is going to last, as just copper alone itself will corrode without that nickel in there. So overall, this is the best stuff I recommend to use. I'll post a link down below so you guys can find it. It's a lot easier to go to the website and order it from there. This only came in a couple days. I was pretty surprised on normal ground shipping. So to make new lines right here, it is pretty simple. It's pretty much just making a brake line. We just have to make a flare at the end. So a universal double flare adapting tool like this is going to work perfect just to make those flares on the end, so we can fit our adapters on there. I didn't get new fittings on here, so we're just have to reuse the old ones. They should be fine, just need to clean them up from any grease or anything like that. You might notice there's some clamps on this old line right here. These are supposed to attach to the oil pan bolts. As the line goes forward past the engine, it's supposed to kind of help hold it on there. These were disconnected on here, probably because someone's replaced the oil pan gasket and just forgot to put them on there. But I got some new lines right here. This is another assortment kit that's nice to have. These are the cushion clamps right here. I use the same ones for the transmission cooler, but we're going to use the 3/8 clamps right here for our 3/8 line. So I'll put a link down below here. This is fairly cheap, 15 bucks off Amazon, and you get a whole bunch of sizes, and it's nice high quality stuff that's going to stand up too as well. I think what I'm going to do is make one line at a time. There is a bunch of bends in here, as you notice, and I don't think it needs to necessarily be as bent as it is right here. Just looking at how it was routed underneath the Jeep. So I might start doing some bends and then feed it into the Jeep and then just kind of cut it when I'm underneath the Jeep and then flare it on one end so that way our hose stays on there a lot easier. As you can tell, someone cut these before and it was just a hose with no flare kind of holding that onto there, so that could have easily popped off if your hose clamps are too tight. So I'm just going to cut off right where this flat spot is so I can get off that old fitting, then we'll clean it up and reuse it. There we go. That's one fitting. Alright, so we're going to start replicating this line right here, making a new one. This used to be our old feed line, but this one's going to be the return line. This is the shortest one that basically goes into the radiator on the passenger side. So this is going to be the one that's going to be mounted the highest, since it has to go to that upper port on the transmission for the return. So first thing we're going to do is take a little bit of this line and we're going to put a flare on it right away. So we got our old fitting we're going to put on here. And then we're going to put a double flare onto this guy right here for 3/8. Now this is just a basic brake flaring tool right here to make that flare for the connection. It's fairly inexpensive. I'm just using an Aries brand. I'll put that in the link down below if you guys want to do it. There's other nifty little tools out there, but this is the most basic one. Same design they've had for many years, and it should get any flaring job done for the most part. Now I got a video on going in depth a little bit more on how to flare brake line and fuel line, so I'll post that down below if you guys want to check that out as well. There we go. We got a flare at the end right there. That should seal up with that fitting when we install it. So now I'm just going to kind of replicate the bends that are in here, just to kind of get the general shape. We'll get it most of the way, and then we won't cut this right away, but we'll go and install it because I want to see if these are long enough. Since this was cut before, I might have it a little bit longer, but we'll get it underneath the Jeep installed on this half right here, and then we'll kind of finish it up and put a flare on the end underneath the Jeep. I don't have any special tools really to bend this and make all these tight curves, but that's what I like about this copper nickel line is it's nice and malleable, so you can kind of do most of the stuff by hand if you're careful, and I've done several vehicles like that without any issues. Alright, so I got this partially bent. It's a little bit tougher on this thicker stuff because it does like to kink more than like 3/16 line or something like that. So right now I'm just feeding this in. This kind of weaved over the starter. And then we'll get it connected to the transmission and make the rest of our bends and hopefully make it look all nice and neat up in here. Alright, got that line in over here to the top where the return is. Got that started, the thread in. Now I'm just going to tighten this guy down right here. It's kind of a tight fit. You can only get so many turns in with a wrench in here. Alright, so we're back for attempt number 2 at this. I made the mistake thinking that I could bend this by hand, but the truth is the bigger size you go in, the less chance you can get away with just bending it by hand, especially for these tight 90-degree bends. Looking at our old piece right here, it just easily kinks and everything like that when you try and bend it by hand, even if you're taking your time. And so I went and broke down, went to Harbor Freight and got a cheap $10 one. It's definitely a lifesaver for doing this. So I went ahead already and just kind of pre-bent both of the lines right here. As you can see, I got them side by side. Try to get them as spot on as I could. This is very time consuming, especially if you have all these complicated bends and different axes and stuff like that. It took me about a good hour per line to do. And then I also left them a little bit long over here, which is going to be the front where the radiator is, and we're going to cut them to size since these other old ones were cut earlier. So I might have them be out a little bit longer than the old ones, but we'll see that when we get there. And then we can put a flare on the end to hold on that rubber line that goes into the connection to our cooler and radiator. But overall, this bender is a lifesaver. I think they got the same one on Amazon, just another Chinese rebranded one. So I could put the link down below if you guys want to check that out. It's still only like 15 bucks or so. Definitely makes nice radiuses easily, and I can just show you a quick example here. You just put it in there. Obviously, you'd line it up to where you need it exactly. Then you can bend it around just like so, and you can even go past 90 just like that. And it doesn't kink it at all. You might have a couple of ripples on the inside radius, but that's just because there's extra material there and it has to go somewhere, but it's not kinking at all. It'll still have nice fluid flow through there and everything like that. So definitely a must for getting those. So I'm going to get this onto the Jeep. I'm going to weave these into place. There's probably still going to be a little bit of adjustment I'm going to have to do to make these fit, because it's really hard to get them exactly precise because you're constantly just checking it to lay on top of each other, making sure that the radiuses are matching and stuff like that. So I'll get these put in there. We'll connect our lines to our transmission, and then we'll come up to the front, wrap it up with all of the soft lines by the radiator heat exchanger and the transmission cooler. Alright, so we're back and I got my new transmission lines all put back into place here, and as you can tell I got them cut down and put a flare on the end here just to hold on the new rubber lines a little bit better than having nothing on there. Ideally you want to do kind of like a barb style flare instead of like a brake line fitting flare, but I don't have the tool to make that, so we're just going to have to roll with this, and it should hold that on there just fine. I went ahead and put some new isolator clamps to hold it to the oil pan bolts, and I got 3 of them on there. So I got the one under here all hooked up, and I zip tied the other line to the one that's secure on there, and this thing is nice and solid now. So now we can go ahead and plumb in the rest of our lines to go into our cooler and our heat exchanger that's in the radiator. So now that we got our lines flipped around, we have this as the feed line right here. This is going to go directly into our radiator heat exchanger, so it's going to go straight into there. Before, this was the return, but I want to hook this up so that way it goes to the radiator first and then the cooler after, and then back into the transmission. So we got our 2 lines right here. I'll just have to cut this, but so we got our lower line right here, which is going to be our feed into the cooler, and it's going to hook up to the exit of where we're going to have it come out of the radiator. So this is simply going to hook up into there, and then the exit off of the transmission cooler is going to go back into the return line, back into the transmission. So I'm going to get these guys cut properly, then we can start hooking this thing up and get this all plumbed in. Alright, we're all plumbed up here. I'll probably just tidy it up, maybe a couple zip ties or something like that, but everything is connected down here. So now we can go back up above. We just got to finish up by filling the transmission with fluid and putting the grill back on. We'll fire this up, make sure we're topped off at the right level, then we should be all done. Alright, so for filling up the transmission, we got to do it through the dipstick tube, which is very conveniently way back here in the firewall. So pull off the dipstick, and then we'll stick a funnel down there. I know I at least drained around 5 or 6 quarts, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it in a gallon right away, and then we'll check it from there. We'll fire it up, get the transmission pump flowing. It'll flow through all the lines and stuff that we just made, get all the air out, and then we'll top it off to a proper level. guys, there we have it. We have this thing all put back together. We got new fluid in it and topped off properly. I let this get up to engine operating temperature and kept adding some fluid in there. It took a good 6 quarts, and I probably still need to go out and buy a little bit more just to make sure it's in that good full range, but I'll do that at a later date. But right now it's good. I went underneath and checked, and we don't have any leaks, so we should be good there. As always, I'll post the links down below if you guys want to purchase the same products that I did. I'll post the links for that bender, the transmission cooler, and all the other little odds and ends that I used for this project. If you guys want to help support the channel, check out outjeeping.com. We have some merch on there, so you guys can check that out and pick up some merch for yourself, and it'll directly go back into these projects to help support the channel. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure to post that below, and I'll be happy to get back to you. As always, if you guys liked this video and found it helpful, make sure to like and subscribe to the Outjeeping YouTube channel to help keep these videos coming. Until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.